To the rapporteur, Mrs. Reda.
Yes, thank you very much. As a first exchange of views on the report on the implementation of the InfoSoc directive on certain aspects of copyright, I would like to propose a preliminary timetable today and some background on the report and what we have in mind. I will just wait 1 second. So the InfoSoc directive was adopted 13 years ago with the aim of harmonizing certain aspects of copyright and of responding to the changed digital environment. In this evaluation report, I would like to address the questions to which extent this InfoSoc directive actually has achieved the goal of harmonization and practice in the different member states, and what further legislative steps are perhaps needed to address particularly problems associated with the territoriality of copyright. Aside from the question of whether this instrument has been successful in harmonizing certain aspects of copyright, I want to address where the technological development has perhaps surpassed the expectation of the InfoSoc directive as it was formulated in 2001. Some solutions may seem anachronistic nowadays, for example, when it comes to the rules for libraries and the requirement for people to access digitized archive materials on reading machines in the premises of the library. So the InfoSoc directive also makes mention of some technologies, like, for example, the CD-ROM, that may not be up to date anymore. And of course, in the last 13 years, new uses have emerged that may be creating problems with the current implementation of the InfoSoc directive. Further, I want to look at which stakeholder groups are affected by the implementation of the InfoSoc directive and which specific problems they have reported in the Commission's consultation on copyright. For example, when it comes to barriers to providing innovative services in the digital single market, to accessing works that have entered the public domain, or to clearing the rights for the use of works, so finding out rights holders and to be able to remunerate them. This is a quick overview of the content, what we're aiming for with this report. Regarding the timetable, I plan on presenting a first draft in the mid of January. That would give us, well, this quite short preparation time is also taken into account the quite ambitious timetable that the Commission has set for itself when it comes to presenting a legislative proposal for copyright reform. I would like this report to also inform the debate on the legislative proposal that may already be coming out in the summer of 2015, and perhaps the Commission can give us some updates on the planned timetable for a legislative proposal on copyright. In any case, it is included in the Commission's working plan for the year of 2015. So if we want to have ample time for amendments until February and do another consideration in committee in the last week of February, it would be possible to already vote on the adoption of the report in the Jury session on the 24th of March and have a plenary vote in April or May. Meanwhile, the EPRS is working on a broader impact assessment that is not just looking at the InfoSoc directive, but at the entire corpus of copyright, which is expected to take somewhat longer than the formulation of this report, but thereby can take a broader look at the impact of all the different directives that are dealing with copyright and hopefully inform the debate on the legislative proposal that will be presented by the European Commission next year. I look forward to working with the shadows of all the different groups and of course also with the working group on copyright to have an informed debate about the existing challenges with the InfoSoc directive in the different member states.
Thank you very much. So, may I open the discussion? Mrs. Honeyball.
Thank you, and thank you to Mrs. Reda for that comprehensive overview. I think it's very useful that we're doing this at the moment, this look at previous legislation and how it's been implemented, because this is a very fast-moving environment, as has been said. And I think that's actually one of the really big challenges that we face in legislating about this, because in just a few years, since 2001, there have been massive changes which have already been pointed out. Digital readers, Amazon Kindle and that kind of thing, for instance, which just didn't exist then. And just the huge changes in the music industry, where music is almost completely now listened to over the internet and downloaded, rather than CDs and all the other things that we used to have. So it's a completely different environment now, and I think that's what makes it such a challenge, and in many ways quite not only challenging but quite difficult thing to legislate on. So I think this preliminary look at what the previous legislation have been will be very helpful to us, so we can track the technological developments and actually hopefully have a clearer view of how to deal with it. However, I think there are some important principles which we need to hold on to for both this look at the implementation of a previous directive and how we go forward on it. And I think one of the key things is that we need, it sounds very obvious, but we do need proper protection of intellectual property, because if we don't do that, we are just simply not going to have the music and the books and the audiovisual programmes that we are so used to. If we don't protect intellectual property so that those who work in this sector, as creators and performers and authors and artists and everybody else, those behind the scenes who put it all together, if we don't have protection of intellectual property, they will not get paid and they will not work in it. And I mean, that sounds very dramatic, but that is actually the case, and that is why this whole issue is so very important. And I think one of the things that Mrs. Reda talked about, which we need to really take a view on, certainly in the future, is territoriality, because this seems to be becoming an absolutely major issue, and there's a lot of differences within the sector on it. People who work in audiovisual have quite a different attitude towards territoriality than the music industry does. So I think that's one of the big issues. But the key thing that we need to do for this, as well as track the technological developments, is to maintain the underlying principle that we need to protect and improve intellectual property rights.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Comodini.
Thank you, Chair. As Shadow Rapporteur for the EPP, I really look forward to working with you on this report. I do agree with you on most of the items that you have highlighted that this report will need to at least address, not least the ever-changing technology through which these services are going to be accessed. And to be very honest, the first question that came to mind when going through the documentation was really and truly, can we ever regulate in a way that would be applicable, that would apply to the ever-growing technological changes? So, in a way, I think that this report will need to underlie also a couple of principles. We do understand that research and innovation will continue to strive and deepen the growth and the European economy. And I think a legislation of the sort must ensure that it incentivises private investment in research and innovation. It actually protects the originator of the idea, but at the same time it must also make the services available and accessible to users. Any proposals that we have to come up with or that we come up with in this report, I feel must be somehow foreseen to be made applicable to the continuous developments in information technology. But we also have to keep in mind that users, the attitudes of users and the expectations of users to these online services are also continuously changing. And most probably the underlying foundation of this report would be how much of a balance are we going to manage to reach between incentivizing research and innovation, that is protecting the originators of the ideas, of the services, the providers themselves, the service providers themselves, as well as the changing expectations and attitudes of the users. I believe this would probably be the crux of whatever proposals we need to make in this report. But I really look forward to working with everyone on this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cavada.
Merci, Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support what my colleagues have just said, in particular what Mrs. Honeyball has said. We shouldn't create the devastating and historical error of thinking that modernizing access to cultural works should eliminate the basic idea of creating an economy of culture. I would like to stress that we are at a historical turning point. There is no culture without an economy of culture. Of course, there's always going to be someone who is going to fiddle around and come up with something and might have some bit of the market. But we would be opening the doors wide to a dominating culture, the English-speaking culture, when I mean American, because I consider the British as part of the European culture. And we talk about free access. Isn't there free access at the greengrocer? Do any of you walk off with his apples without paying for them? No. There is a big major danger which is in the European Commission, and we're not a majority on this, which has to be combated at all costs. We want European cultures. Each country has its own culture. On a continental context, which should be as harmonized as possible, and where access should be facilitated. But there is a major danger here, and I don't want this to be overlooked, because I can see this creeping in over the years. Everything should be free. Yes, everything should be free of cost. No. And in fact, people who say that buy their computers. They don't just walk off with it from the store. So this is a highly political issue, and so political that it's going to affect our democracies, the way our democracies work. We have a political culture, not a cultural policy. We have a policy of living together. We have laws which are based on our cultural roots, and we must absolutely defend this throughout the world. People are watching us. There are two options in Europe, and I'll finish with this. There's the possibility of aligning the content to the pipes, and I'm against that, and I'm not the only one who's against that. We'll have a large majority in the plenary for that. And the second option is to think that, as I've already said elsewhere, that we are like those who own oil in the ground between two world wars. But they weren't the ones who got rich. It was the pipe owners who got rich. We have the content. I don't want there to continue to be this dealing in pipelines. I would like to see fiscal harmonization in all of the continental European countries, so that the market helps the culture and that the tax is paid as it should be today.
Mr. Kester.
Es ist offensichtlich, dass ein modernisiertes Copyright.
Well, it's clear that a modernized copyright system is absolutely essential if we're going to bring forward the cultural industries and promote them. But I think that there's an important aspect that we need to bear in mind here. In the cultural sector, you've got four main players. You've got the creative people, you've got the producers, the traders, and the users or consumers. At the moment, it's the traders, the intermediaries that have the dominant position, and they are the ones that are building monopolies in the digital society. They are the ones who are drawing out all of the profits. And as Mrs. Honeyball has already stressed, we have to bear in mind the creatives. We need to create a copyright system that protects the creators of culture. They are the ones that bring culture into the world. Their position needs to be strengthened by a modern copyright system. That is our task if we are to try to get back to a balanced relationship between the creatives, the producers, the intermediaries, and the consumers and users at the end. So that is the huge task that we have before us. If we want a cultural economy, then we need to be trying to struggle against piracy as well. Copyright is an important instrument in trying to combat piracy, to try and ensure that we have a proper market process in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Geringer.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with most of what colleagues have said so far. I just want to emphasize one aspect. Culture nowadays is not some kind of niche activity that we have to protect, take care of it for many reasons, among them to maintain one's national identity. Culture is part of the economy. That's where employment is generated, new jobs. We have the cultural industry, and if we are harmonization at a market, the mainstream market is harmonized, but everything that is on the internet is divided up into 28 subsectors. So I think that we should enlarge the territoriality to the territory of the EU. So here we should harmonize our territorial rights, otherwise the digital market will not work. I'm not only speaking about books, about recordings, but also about Xerox machines, tablets, other types of devices where we can download something, copy something. My tablet can be used for copying content, so they are part of the copyright law. So we have new challenges here, and this is closely linked to economic development and to the market. And this is a wider aspect than only copyright aspects that are not compatible with new technologies. We do have copyright laws. They are implemented in member states, but the system does not work. And that is why we have this illegal but very vibrant activity of copying content. So we should make sure that we can enforce copyright, and this is a very important task also in terms of information campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marinho Pinto.
Obrigado. Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, on this issue, I do have a few opinions that I'd like to pass on to you. I do agree with the basic idea of a culture economy, but I have some reservations about some aspects which I think could be called fundamentalism that seems to be growing around the problem. Well, if you'll allow me to situate the problem, we've got economic benefits that can be drawn from the creation of artworks, Petrarch, Camões, Cervantes, Rubens, Bach, Mozart, Van Gogh, Beethoven. If you go all the way back to ancient Greece, now the question here is that we might be opening the door to a huge problem, which is the making art a commodity. I think that really distances us brings up a distance between the consumers and the creators of the art that's created. If we are basically using economic measures and reduce the access to the public, then I think that what we're actually doing is leading up to a situation where good music and good reading is a privilege for the elites. The internet has opened up huge doors to allow mass consumption of cultural production. I think that this opens up new horizons. It's creating a new kind of person, a more cultivated human being, open to music from all of times and places around the world. You can use the internet to read works that were only accessible in the past to those who had enough money to buy them. I think that what we could do is try to find some kind of point of balance. I don't agree with what Mr. Cavada said when he says that a cultural work is just like vegetables that we buy at the market. If you want to buy vegetables, you have to go to the market. But here we have a situation where cultural works can come to our houses, right to our homes, just thanks to a click of a mouse. Well, I think that this is marvelous. It's transforming humanity, it's transforming the world, it's transforming culture and civilization itself. Let's be open to what is new here. We should create incentives to ensure that people should all have access to works of art through the internet. In the past, it was just the elites that had access to this kind of thing. So we need to spread culture through society. That is a positive aspect. It's something that can't simply be destroyed by commodifying art and cultural goods. However, piracy is a totally different issue, where they are trying to enrich themselves by undue access to a work. Okay, if I want to listen to Jim Morrison or Beethoven or Wagner in my own home, well, I would have to pay for it, of course, and I would have to use my computer. But when you make a payment for a cultural work, you have to understand that it's very important for the entire population of the world to have access to magnificent cultural works. Whether we're contemplating a beautiful image in a painting, or if we're trying to read books in a form other than in print, and listening to the music that you like.
Thank you, Mrs. Rosier.
Merci, Président. Rapidement.
Thank you, Chair. Now, just to come back over this question, whether or not these cultural goods have got a specific economic value, I think that this discussion, if we look at the amounts of money involved given in this area, well, I think that then we can say that it's clear that these cultural goods have got an economic value. However, I don't think that that means that we should consider them like any other goods, but I don't think it would be right to say that they have no economic value and that they can be dealt with completely without cost. Now, I think that we need to be careful when we're dealing with this question with regard to the status that we give to these cultural goods and the fact that there's a political value and an intellectual value with regard to these cultural goods that must not be forgotten. Now, of course, we do have cultural goods which are in the public domain and which there are no more rights, and today they have completely free access, but the area of creation, it's not something just dealing with the past, it's ongoing. And in Europe today, we are lucky enough to have a cultural creation, creativity, which is doing very well, and indeed it would be a great shame for us if there were intermediaries who are making a lot of money in this area of cultural goods. It would be a pity if we were not able to protect our cultural area and its sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was the last speaker on my list, so Mrs. Reda.
I would like to thank my colleagues for a lot of very important remarks. I think it's very important what the shadow rapporteur, Mrs. Hannibal, said about providing the proper incentives for artists and authors to be able to continue to create. And in this vein, I really welcome that the EPRS is also looking at this question, and I think we have a better basis of data on which incentives actually work. And also the hearing that we have had with experts in Juri has already given us some ideas of how we can address this problem. In the same vein, I absolutely agree with my colleagues Mr. Cavada and Mr. Costa that were referring to making sure that at the same time to ensure access for people to cultural content, but to also secure remuneration. And in this vein, Mr. Costa highlighted that in a lot of cases the intermediaries in the production chain have a very strong position versus the authors. So we should look at how we can strengthen the negotiating positions of authors versus the intermediaries and make sure that the remuneration collected, for example, by collecting society actually ends up with the authors and is fairly distributed. And in this regard, we need to look at the transparency of the collecting societies and also the easy registration of works so that people who want to acquire a license for works have an easy time finding out who the right holders actually are. Further, Mrs. Comodini, shadow for the EPP, highlighted the importance of research and innovation, and I think in this regard the European Parliament has also already made some very important decisions, for example when it comes to open access publishing in the context of Horizon 2020. But I think there are still some challenges ahead, particularly when it comes to copyright, for example, to allow the text and data mining and ensure the competitiveness of European researchers when being able to really use data in a flexible way. And in this, in order to allow this, we also have to look at the database directive and its re-evaluation. I agree it's not just about adapting copyright to the technological changes, but also aiding the Commission in its plan to complete the digital single market. And one of the big problems that is right now existing with territoriality is that it is standing in the way of the transparency of the legal system. So as with the aim of better lawmaking, we really need to make sure that it is transparent for Internet users what is actually allowed and what is not. And having more harmonization across borders is certainly one way of achieving that. So thank you very much for these first remarks, and I look forward to the collaboration on this report with all of you.
Mr. Cavada wishes to say one more sentence.
Oui, pardon, Madame.
Yes, Madam. There was just information I wanted to tell everyone. The working group on copyright will take place on the 17th of September in the presence, December in the presence of Mr. Oettinger.